I arrived in England after about a year at the time when commercial television was just beginning. And there was another country with filled with people who knew nothing about the business. And I had this enormous stretch of experience going back a year, 2 years. So I was hired, provided that I would teach other directors how to direct for television. And so I did. And one of the first people I met, because I'd done a program on the air which was so appalling that it made no sense whatsoever. And I had a phone call from a man who said, "You probably don't know me, but I saw your program last night. It was either the worst thing I have ever seen on British television, or you may be onto something." And I said, "Well, if there's a choice, I'll take the latter." And he said, "Would you like lunch?" I said, "Fine." And it was Peter Sellers. And we ended up doing 3 series of TV goon shows. Nothing is left of them because the people who provided the money for the programs knew that it would cost £75 to record them with a tele-recording process. We then decided what we could do. Peter was a great enthusiast for all toys. He used to have a different car every week, and he would buy the latest cameras. So he bought a new Powered Bullock 16mm camera, and we went out into a field with our friends, and in a day and a half shot a short film. And I won't go into it, but through a series of accidents, this film, which cost £70 to make, was nominated for an Academy Award. So I suddenly thought, well, I'm now a film director. And nobody called for 2 or 3 years, and then I was able to do a pop musical, and the Beatles happened to have seen a running, jumping, and standing still film, which was the short film, and the pop musical. And so when we were introduced to each other, they felt they could trust me to produce that same sort of useless amateurism that they'd noticed before. So out of that, we then started to work. I don't think it ever occurred to us to ask the Beatles to play the Musketeers, to be anything but themselves. We tried to produce an ambiance where they were familiar and that they felt comfortable. They had done press conferences. They knew that sense of being in rooms. John Lennon did say in 1963, I said, "You'd just come back from Sweden, how was it?" And he said it was a car in a room and a room and a car and a cheese sandwich. That very much was what the whole first half of Hard Day's Night was set out to do. It was deliberately shot in real places with genuinely low ceilings, and people were always at them and nagging them. And for the whole first third, maybe more of the film, it was important that they were being hounded and told what to do and where to go, so that there's a certain moment when they break out and refuse and run down the fire escapes and go into a field and just be idiots. That sense of relief was what we were trying to do, and that was cut with the music of Can't Buy Me Love, and it's when the film begins to take off. I wanted it to be as natural an experience for them as possible. And the one thing that we always felt that was important was that we tried to delineate their personalities artificially, because there was always that sense, especially in being with them, that they were 4 parts of a marriage, that they were very protective and very close and very like each other. And that to help out, it was important to create artificially that George was mean, that Paul was the cute one, that John was the cynic, and that Ringo was up the back and unloved.
Aye, the Liverpool shuffle.
There's a very glib definition of surrealism in that surrealism is the point at which 2 concentric circles of reality meet. In other words, you could have chorus girls and U-boat commanders going down a spiral metal staircase. The point at which they're both on the same stair rung is that point that's surreal. Or verbally, what's our course captain, prunes and custard? You know, course is the point at which surrealism starts and ends. The one that was, people often ask, because occasionally I do get asked about the Beatles from time to time, that I think was the most accurate performer was George, because he never attempted too much or too little, but he always was right in the center. You know, it's like Ella Fitzgerald, whatever note she hit, it was always absolutely in the center of the note. She just couldn't not. She'd die. And George was always, he got out of the scene everything there was to get out of it. There wasn't a lot for him to do, but whatever he had to do, he did very well.
Right. On your way.
You are?
You heard. On your way. Troublemaker.
I think there was always the sense, and it was so easy to portray physically, that Ringo was the one up the back that nobody looks at, and he's just holding the band together. And I think, strangely enough, I think he was a much better. I'm not a drummer. I've never been a drummer. I don't even have to take the fifth. But I think he was a better drummer than a lot of people give credit to, because he was pretty solid. He seemed to hold on to what was necessary. But it was an easy game to play, that he was the one that was feeling that he lacked respect and that nobody really paid much attention to him. And of course, he had a lugubrious expression permanently, and he did have the ability to come up with the most asinine non sequiturs. I mean, it was he that invented the title, It's a Hard Day's Night, I'm sure everybody knows, and came up with the title for the second film, which was 8 Arms to Hold You, and thank God we didn't have to use it in the end.
I know. Hi, John. John! Did you want something? Oh, I could eat the lot of you.
You look great with an apple in your gob.
Well, I always think that John is one of the 3 or 4 most interesting people I've ever met, and I've been blessed with having met a lot of fairly well-known people, both in regal and political circumstances. But John was, I think, unique in that he suffered fools very badly, and he was quick-witted and quickly cynical, hated pomposity and hated people in authority who treated them as hired servants. I mean, he was a man that threw a grudge quickly and then disposed of it, and then you would get on and do the next work. He just said what he felt, and it was refreshing, and he pricked all our bubbles of pomposity, and people like that are sorely needed.
Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt.
I think with Paul was the most theatrical of them all. He had a girlfriend who was an actress. She and her parents and her brother went to the theater a lot. Paul went with her. He loved the theater. He loved show business, as it were, in a way that the other 3 really didn't care. I think this was a disadvantage to him, that I think in a way sometimes Paul tried too hard to act. In the nicest possible way, because, you know, Paul was always very willing and has remained a lovely guy. But I think that had he been less enamored with the trappings of cinema and the theater, he might have been a bit more relaxed.
Oh, why don't we do the show right here? Yeah! 2, 3, 4.
I think they were so relieved that it wasn't, hey kids, let's do the show right here, that they were being unnecessarily kind. And I think that they were swept up, and we were all swept up in the exuberance of the moment, of the fact that they were 4 boys who could stand up for themselves and be amusing to order. That sense of how they protect each other, how they were loyal to each other, how they cushioned themselves against the realities of the outside world that sometimes treated them with dreadful condescension. So in that respect, I did my best to hold that and put it on film. I think they liked it. I think they and I, we were just relieved we all got away with it. They weren't too disappointed. I think to this day we have never talked about it or about anything that they did. John said about help, and I cannot use the language as he described it, but I'm an extra in my own film. And I know what he meant. There was a series of circumstances we didn't have a lot of choice, but I think that's the entire amount of comment and criticism and constructive commitment that the 5 of us have ever had. When we showed it for the first time, and United Artists were a very liberal and far-thinking company in which, by and large, they would say to people they trusted, this is the amount of money you have, we'll see you at the premiere. There was such an aura about them, and they had such an impact on everyone's lives that I think the exuberance just carried us on. And I was just lucky to be part of it. When asked 10, 20 years later, what were the 60s like? It said, don't ask me, I was at the center of the universe. You know, it was just so wonderful that, you know, you really didn't know. There was no way to be objective about what was going on. If you have 3 weeks to cut, edit, dub, mix, check a print on a film, you have no time whatsoever for thinking, I have achieved aesthetic greatness. I think when we made Hard Day's Night, we knew that they were wonderful and that I really enjoyed their music. As to their longevity, I had never thought about it, didn't worry about it. We knew that by contract we had to get the film out quickly. The reason that was so was because United Artists thought that they would be a one-month wonder. I think that in terms of gratitude, I owe them a lot more than they owe me. They gave me a film career for starts. That's what the Beatles gave me. I was able to trade on that for about 40 years. So all I did was to try to make sure that they were presented in a way that was respectful and as honest as it could be, and as close to what I think they would have liked to have made as a film.